Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Welcome everyone to the 17th episode of Project Uproar. Now we have back my brother and also my business partner for AnimeUproar, back for the second time. First time in video, so you guys can see him for the first time if you don't know him from AnimeUproar. And today we're going to talk about anime, life lessons from anime, and why you should watch anime.
What is up, gamers?
Yeah, so myself, I'm in a bit of a different chair as you two. I'm coming from this outside perspective, so I may sound like, this sort of unexperienced. I may get mixed up in my terms, so I apologize. But first thing I wanted to ask was, for Animak, how were you first introduced to anime?
Yeah, so the very first anime I've ever seen would be like the kids' anime, like Pokemon, right? Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, which did air here in Canada on like YTV and these TV shows. So that was my first exposure to anime. However, I didn't really differentiate between that and regular cartoons that you would see, like a Disney cartoon or whatever, Nickelodeon cartoons. I just thought it was all the same thing. It was only later that I realized that anime was actually from Japan, and that in Japan, they don't have the kind of social stigma that we have here in terms of watching anime or cartoons when you're older. In fact, a lot of cartoons are actually geared towards adults specifically, or at least older teens. And I realized that when I discovered, thanks to my brother over here, Igor, I discovered Death Note, which is an anime that is about a high school guy. However, when you actually watch it, it's quite dark. It's very mature, and it's very like intellectually oriented, and that really woke me up to the fact that anime is not just for kids. Anime is actually really enjoyable for adults as well.
Yeah, definitely. And later on, he leaves high school, so you get like the university experience too, and it has like jumping years and stuff like that. So definitely very mature anime dealing with very mature philosophical issues.
Yeah, and it's interesting because growing up, my understanding of television was, as you mature, you start watching kind of real people acting, right? Especially this was the case in like sitcoms and comedies. And I think that's why The Simpsons took everyone so off guard, because it was an adult humor, yet it was this cartoon show, and same like Family Guy as well. So that's interesting. So and I watched that stuff as well. I watched Pokemon growing up. Was there something about Pokemon specifically and those animes that you became kind of attached to compared to other Americanized cartoons?
Well, I definitely was insanely into Pokemon, and I think it's just a brilliant marketing scheme, Pokemon in itself, right? Because you have all these different cool creatures with different types of powers, and you can collect them all. So, I was definitely crazy about Pokemon cards, Pokemon Happy Meals, all that fun stuff. So in that sense, I feel like Pokemon and other Japanese media definitely have a marketing edge that once they were actually introduced here to the West, it really spoke to people. But in terms of all of that, I kind of got out of it for a while because, like you, I had this idea that, cartoons are for kids, but then you mature and you get into other stuff. But yeah, it was only later because Igor never really got out of anime. He was always watching it. And then as he got older, he was telling me, man, you will enjoy this. Check this out. And I did, and I definitely did enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, it was funny. At first he didn't, but then he was in Serbia, and he just happened to see it on TV, and he gave it a shot, and then he's like, yeah, Igor talked about this. And then he's like, oh my God. And like, he really liked it.
Yeah, it was funny. I was in Serbia, and on a Serbian TV channel with like subtitles, they had Death Note, an anime. And that ended up, and when I got back home here, I actually watched the whole thing, and I loved it. And then he kept recommending more anime to me, and I kept watching it, and then I was hooked.
Yeah, really cool. Do you happen to know, just out of curiosity, because myself growing up, a huge anime I was into was Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Like I was the biggest fan, especially in grade school. I remember 8:30 every night. I'd watch Dragon Ball Z with my friend. Nowadays, I don't know if you're aware of this, but do animes typically still air in Canada? Like I know I watched it on YTV.
Yeah, they still have like anime they air on like Adult Swim and different channels in the United States and Canada. I don't watch TV anymore. I watch everything online on like online streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Crunchyroll. So I don't personally watch them on TV shows. on TV channels, but they do have them from what I hear, and so they are popular, even more so now than back in the Pokemon days, in terms of a much wider variety of Japanese anime being watched here.
Definitely.
Really cool.
Yeah, Netflix. I was gonna say Netflix. I think that's one of their most interesting things. I'm probably biased, but that they're bringing into the world, the anime, like a lot of them. And if you look at some other competitors like Disney, that's gonna be possibly Netflix's edge. The fact that they still have the Disney, the anime shows.
Yeah, because obviously Disney produces their own stuff, but I think although Disney initially inspired anime in Japan, because Disney was before anime took off in Japan, Disney was doing really well all over the world. Disney was world famous, but now often Western media is influenced by Japanese anime, so I find that interesting.
Yeah, really cool. I'm curious, what is like an underappreciated or underrated anime that's out right now that you feel that more people should be watching?
Oh, there's so many. Right now, Vinland Saga, I would say, is really underrated, mostly because it is only available legally on Amazon Prime, which is the least popular out of the streaming services that are big here for anime specifically. Vinland Saga is an anime about Vikings in the 11th century, and it's really interesting. It's based on a manga that is very critically acclaimed, and actually dropped a video on it on the AnimeUproar channel 2 days ago, talking about kind of all the lessons that this anime can teach us about human nature, about warfare, about struggling in life, and how hard life can sometimes be. They use the Vikings in a very harsh time, 11th century, but I mean there are a lot of lessons there that you can apply in our own modern world. So that is one of the things that I really want to talk about today, is the idea that you guys talk about self-development here on the podcast, and obviously I'm also very much into self-development. I think it's very important, but anime is self-development, and as are books and any good media. If you watch anime, and you can watch it just for the action, but you can also look at the lessons that you learn. And now obviously it depends. Certain anime are better for this than others, just like certain cartoons in the West are better for this than others. But there are plenty of lessons and things that you can learn from anime that you can apply in your own everyday life. Now, you can say that a lot of this is common sense, right? But even common sense is not actually that common. You need to be reminded every single day about all these common sense things that you should be doing in order for you to actually develop. So that's why people read self-development books constantly. And a lot of the stuff, it's stuff they've heard before, but they forget. And I think anime is the same way. If you watch good anime and you apply it in your everyday life, I think you will improve your life because of that.
Yeah, I really like that. Especially, I know Art of Manliness, another podcast, has posted about this idea how, yes, a lot of this stuff is common sense, but we almost need it. It's almost like church. You go to church just to go through the ritual. Like, you know what they're going to say if you're someone who's devoutly going to church, but you need that reminder continually. So I'm curious, maybe you could get into specifics. I know you talked about the Viking one, but how does anime kind of uniquely frame some of these lessons that's maybe different from other art forms, or maybe the same as other art forms, like literature, for example?
Yeah, I would compare it to literature in terms of how effective it can be, for sure. I think what's unique about anime is that it comes from a unique cultural and historical context in Japan. So there are going to be cultural differences from us that are going to be new and unique to us, which is often interesting to see and learn about. But also the fact that in Japan, anime doesn't have to be for children, so cartoons don't have to be for children, allows them to really explore philosophical themes and dark themes in anime, something that you don't usually see here. Like, yes, like you said, we have Simpsons, Family Guy, Rick and Morty, but usually these are very comedy-centered cartoons for adults. Whereas in Japan, you can find a horror cartoon for adults, you can find an action cartoon for adults, you can find a drama, all sorts of stuff. And because it's animated, you don't have to make a live-action series or a live-action movie that is going to cost a lot of money. You're going to need a huge budget. You're still going to need a budget, but anime is less expensive to make than like live-action, big-budget movie. So it gives them opportunities to explore things that you don't see in Hollywood, because in order for them to explore something, they need to make money, and that means they need a big budget, and that means they got to make another Marvel film. So I think anime is unique because you get to see certain things that you wouldn't see over here.
Definitely. And there's a specific genre which we can talk about, which is called shonen, which is like pretty much a demographic. It's going for a specific demographic. And a lot of it has to do with overcoming kind of the impossible, overcoming the odds, a character with a goal, working hard towards that goal, which I feel like is exactly that kind of situation where we need that reminder of, yes, like I can do this, I can rise above like my circumstances, because I feel like a lot of times in life, we can fall into that autopilot mode where we hear our friends and family who probably mean the best, but they're saying like, oh, don't dream too big, don't expect too much, don't do this, don't do that. And then all of a sudden that starts becoming the norm. And sometimes these crazy anime, including, in a good way, I mean that, and including Gurren Lagann, which you're probably going to talk about at some point, and I want you to, because it's like Animak's favorite anime. But yeah, like when they do the impossible, when they overcome that kind of what people are saying are their limitations, when they overcome their own, what they think are their own limitations, that to me is also a reminder to like, okay, I can do stuff that people say is impossible. I could do stuff that even I might think is impossible at some points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of media I find nowadays can be very cynical and very kind of life sucks, very existentialist in a way. Both if you read like more recent Stephen King books, or if you look at a lot of these Netflix shows or whatever, they can be very dark and kind of depressing. And a lot of people want to see that now because they are very cynical about the modern world. But I really like the idea of having these like over-the-top action series which inspire you to overcome no matter what. They talk about the importance of things like, having a passion, working hard towards it, importance of friendship and ideals and sticking by your principles. I think all of that stuff, again, makes sense. It's all common stuff that we've been exposed to. However, I think it's important to remember that you need to remind yourself of this type of stuff every single day. Otherwise, we go back into autopilot and we forget.
Yeah, really cool. I'm curious. I know like someone like Jordan Peterson has talked about things like biblical characters, different archetypes, right? Different people that we can learn from. And I'm curious, like, who is a character or characters? I'm sure you have multiple that you think we could learn from, or like of whom you respect from a variety of animes.
Oh yeah.
Who are certain ones that I know on your channel, you have certain videos where you focus on specific characters for reasons. Like, do you want to talk about some of those characters and what we could learn from how they are on the show?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's like one of those things where you're just like, you just threw like so many options
yeah,
at
just
me.
open.
But yeah, like,
let's just say, how about we say we'll narrow it down three characters.
So Igor mentioned Gurren Lagann, which is my favorite anime, and the reason I love it is because it has this character Kamina, who is so inspirational, and he's someone who is able to see outside the box. He's able to, the first episode of that show actually really fits Plato's allegory of the cave really well. So if someone's familiar with that, Plato's allegory of the cave is embodied in the first episode of this anime. And basically the lesson there is, you should do the impossible, meaning that you should not accept what other people say is impossible. You shouldn't let them frame you into that box of, certain things are possible, other things are impossible. Don't even try going beyond this framework, these boundaries that we set for you. That anime really teaches you that no, you set the boundary. You can think outside the box. You can accomplish things that other people think is impossible. And again, I mean, all the great men in history, from Tesla to, Elon Musk to so many other, geniuses, they managed to accomplish something or invent something or create something that other people would have thought was impossible. They saw it. They were visionaries, right? Steve Jobs. Most of them were laughed at first when they talked about the stuff that they talked about, because people could not see beyond that horizon, beyond that box. It was something they never even thought of before. But you can actually, if you're a visionary, you can be that person that creates a new category in business or a new way of looking at things, or solves something that people could not solve for hundreds of years. Like the invention of penicillin, for example. For hundreds of years, people could not cure infections. And then penicillin comes and just changes the game. I believe penicillin is for infections, right?
Yeah, not the science
Talking
major.
to the wrong people.
No, but that's totally true. And I think you'll get that a lot. Like when you're, there's that quote, when you're on the side of the majority, like you should probably examine yourself and like why that is, and if you're in the right place, and because it's easy to fall into a group mentality, really easy, and it's almost hardwired into us from like tribe times, and these kinds of reminders, like it can be anime, it can be literature, but I think anime, like I think one of the unique things is really that like that main goal that they really strive hard to overcome, and there's all these obstacles and they really go for it, and it's like over the top, like being king of the world in some way, either Pirate King or Hokage or something, right? So I think anime is really good at that, just that overwhelming like positivity, but not blind positivity or blind optimism, because there will be struggles.
Yes.
But the idea is your end goal should be huge, right? It should be Bill Gates says people underestimate what they can do in a year, overestimate what they can do in a year, and underestimate what they can do in 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the idea is to, yes, have a huge goal, like, don't limit it, but be patient and realize that you're going to have obstacles and it's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah, that's a very important lesson. Another character that I can bring up, Asta, who is the protagonist of Black Clover, which is another shonen anime. He's a huge optimist, but he has a lot of limitations that he faces constantly. And he overcomes them by just being stubborn, being a stubborn, motivated guy who just will be positive no matter what, and he will push through no matter what. And he also has great friends who support him and all that stuff. But yeah, it's an example of someone who faces challenges, real challenges, and yet he remains an optimist in the face of them. But you can't pretend that you won't face challenges. That would be unrealistic. But you have to have that inner confidence to face a challenge, see it as a learning opportunity, and overcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Really cool. I know, turning to you, Igor, you created a video not too long ago about a character and
Yes.
about what this character could teach men, which is an
Yes.
interesting
Oh, yeah.
topic to cover. And I'm curious, like, what was your kind of inspiration for that video, and why did you want to, what was so interesting about that character that you wanted to create that?
Well, that to me
content?
is like, that's Eska Noir, and that's one of the most interesting characters to me, just because of how he's really like overpowered in the sense, and he's really like hype, and he's a really interesting character in that sense, because he's a showstopper. When he shows up, things go crazy. So like he's a really exciting character in that way, and he's associated with manly for obvious reasons, are his mustache and his muscles. Like those are the obvious reasons for him being like manly, but that's why I wanted to move beyond that. And in that video I focused on like some other traits that he has. One of like, and for the why I did the video, I just feel like I want to get like this series that I could combine self-development and anime with to like take off. And that video did all right. It got like so far like 37,000 views, but for our channel it's not like great. So what I really want is to get a series where people love it, and I can talk about anime and self-development at the same time, right? Because those are like my two main passions, along with literature. So in that situation, I really, really like the fact that, for example, he doesn't care what other people think, in the sense that people who aren't close to him, right? Because we talked about that book, what's his name, that wrote How Not to Give a Fuck, was it? Ryan?
Oh, Mark Manson.
Mark Manson, yes. So he talks about a bunch of different stuff, like you have limited fucks to give, you gotta pick what you give fucks about. And he really cares about his friends, but he doesn't care about like what enemies think or someone else thinks, right? He doesn't concern himself. He's like a lion, not concerning himself with the opinions of sheep. So I like that. If you have your principles, if you have your purpose, you have your true friends, you don't need to worry too much about like what everybody thinks about you. That's one thing. Then there's the idea that he cares about his friends and he's appreciative. So when it comes to people talking about when his friends fight with him, he'll be the bigger man and he'll like forgive them, and he'll always be there when it's important. And even when he loses his powers, which is like an important thing, he still, as a character, shows up and risks his life. So that's one of the that's another one of the lessons. Like the idea of having a purpose, sticking to it, and being willing to die for your principles. I think that's a Stoic idea that's also present in Eska Noir.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I know you're big into Stoicism. Do you see Stoicism? Oh, you're okay. Perfect. Do you see? How do you see?
Well, I mean, you and me.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm sure Animak has his moments. He actually introduced me to Marcus Aurelius originally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I respect Stoicism a lot. I delve into different philosophies as well. I mean, I like to read about Eastern philosophy, like of Confucianism and Buddhism. I like to read about ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the middle, kind of the Renaissance period and the Enlightenment age. So I wouldn't call myself a Stoic, but I definitely think there's a lot of things to learn from Stoicism.
For sure. What sort of? I know you have like a philosophy background, political science background. Where do you see those ideas? I know you talked about Plato before. Where do you see some of those ideas at work in anime?
Yeah, so there's a lot of places. I see a lot of different philosophies in different anime depending on the context. I just actually today dropped a video or released a video on the channel about Eren Yeager, the protagonist from Attack on Titan, and Niccolo Machiavelli. So the Renaissance Italian political thinker and philosopher, because I see a lot of Machiavelli's philosophy in where the story of Attack on Titan is going right now, and Eren as a character specifically. Now, of course, it's never going to be a one-to-one comparison, but you can definitely see certain things about it which are interesting. Same thing with, I also had a video that I made about Dr. Stone, which is a newer anime that's currently airing, and how I see philosophies of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and like Edmund Burke and some of the Marx and Lenin and all this type of stuff at play in this anime, and how these philosophies are kind of clashing in many ways. And yeah, I mean, you can look at that conflict as just two guys who with a different philosophy on life, but both of their philosophies are rooted in these other thinkers that we have in our own world. And because I'm familiar with them, I can see the thought patterns there and the parallels. So I like to point that out. I don't think it's necessary to enjoy it, but I like to do it because, of course, that's part of my profession and something I enjoy.
Do you believe that the anime not only kind of represent these thinkers and philosophies, do you think they also kind of take it further and add their own kind of take on them and expand their ideas?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always going to happen. And sometimes maybe the author isn't even necessarily directly referencing a specific philosophy. But of course, regardless of an author's intention, he can pick up on something that has been already said by someone else, but in a different way. Because obviously when you're creating your own anime or manga, you're telling your own story. You can infuse it with certain aspects of philosophy, etc. But in the end of the day, it is your story and your characters, and the way that they interplay with each other is going to make it like a unique work. But yeah, I really like kind of looking at these things and drawing these messages and themes out in anime and talking about them on the channel. Now, on the channel, we also have a lot of just like informative stuff, informative videos that people like to watch to learn about the anime in particular. But we also do like to throw in some stuff about philosophy, about history, parallels between the anime and our own history, our own world philosophy, etc.
Yeah.
It's funny talking about just current anime that we're watching, and like I always try to throw in some self-development, like no matter what the video is, in like certain examples. And right now I'm doing a video about a character from Demon Slayer, which is an anime that I really like right now, and it's the character Zenitsu, which I think is a very interesting character, and he can be pretty like cowardly, but at the same time I think it's a great manifestation in media or in art of resistance, like how we talk about Ryan, the war of art. Well, here we have a character who is dealing with that resistance, and we have that in different characters, like in Evangelion. Shinji is a huge example of that. Yeah. And really, like, resistance is this thing that shows up when we're trying to do something meaningful, right? When we're trying to in some way do what our purpose is, what we're meant to do, what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to step up. It'll develop us as human beings. And the more important it is, the more resistance we feel. So Zenitsu is a great example. Like he feels a lot of fear, but he develops as a character, and eventually he faces that resistance, and it's a really powerful thing to watch. And it can motivate us when we have like, we might not be fighting like spider demons, like, which is like one thing he does, but we have our own things like the empty page, right, that we have to conquer every day if we want to write, or making videos, right, we have to put ourselves out there every time and see what happens. So all that time there's like these resistance, but you can build up those muscles, and eventually it can get easier, even if it's never going to be like, you know, effortless. So I think those examples like abound, and that's why I even have you guys can't see them, but I have Goblin Slayer and Kamina there. Those are from two different anime, Goblin Slayer and Gurren Lagann. And one is like, you know, that idea of in Gurren Lagann, see the invisible, which to me is like, you know, see what most people can't see, like the possibilities, like what's possible in the long term, and do the impossible, right? That's another thing he says. And just, he is so motivational that it's like he forces you to step up and to be like a better man, because he's like an ideal and you want to live up to that. Then there's Goblin Slayer, which just shows he's an interesting guy because he does the work no one else wants to do. He kills goblins. So no, that's like the valueless job. No one appreciates it, but someone's got to do it, and that's his purpose, and he carries it out. And like, it's very stoic. He's very stoic in that way, and he just does it. And those are his principles. That's his purpose, and he just goes and does it. And I think that's also important too. It reminds me that we are not entitled to the fruits of our labor, just the labor, because he's not doing it to get thanks. He's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing to do, and he's doing a thankless job. And obviously, thankfully, we don't have a thankless job. Like, we have a lot of positive comments as YouTubers. Like, obviously, you have hate, but you have a lot of positive comments that like I read, and I'm like, wow, I love the fact that I get to do this job. But sometimes you gotta disassociate yourself from the results, from the outcome, from what people are gonna think, and then just, you know, do the work for its own sake. Appreciate the fact that every day you're putting in the work, and eventually that'll build the character who does it no matter what the external rewards are, right? So I think that's what he reminds me of. So it's funny because I can have those characters just sitting there, and if I look at them, I'll be like, okay, you know, put in the work, one, the other, everything is possible, see the invisible, you know. So in that way, they're really, because sometimes anime is over the top, it's quick way to remember this stuff, while a specific character, let's say in a novel, is much more complex, has a lot more, well, in anime it can be complex too, but it's not as over the top usually in a novel. So in that sense, when you see that character, you might associate him being scared, him being brave here, him being in love with someone here, him doing this and doing that, but it's not as like right to the feels. I mean, that might be with the color scheme and everything. Like, it just perfectly, like, some of these characters really right away get me to be excited and get me motivated.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually didn't think of the fact that Goblin Slayer is quite stoic, but you're right. And the whole over-the-top thing, it's interesting because I think that is a difference between anime and like Western media. Anime really does have extremely eccentric over-the-top characters that often in this type of Western media would be considered unrealistic. And I think now with like Rick and Morty and stuff like that, it's getting more into the Western world. But yeah, there's this idea that in order for a character to be good, he has to be realistic. But that's, again, limiting us because, yeah, maybe a character that's eccentric and over the top and really powerful, we can't relate to them on that level, but we can relate to them on other levels. And that still makes, A, this an interesting character, and B, it makes him an aspirational character. Because I think a big part of art should be aspiring for something greater, not just looking at, okay, well, this is how the world is. This is beautiful. Or, oh, here's this abstract thing. It's interesting in that it's so unique. I think that the best kind of art is art that makes us aspire to achieve greater things, that teaches us to be better people. And I think with anime, we get a lot of that.
Definitely. And like, yeah, I'm just looking, I always have this Karate Kid quote in the background. And I'm just thinking like Karate Kid, you know, it's a good movie. I love it. But when I think of either of those two characters, Mr. Miyagi or Daniel-san, I always nothing crazy comes to mind. Like I don't get those emotions, but and it's just like real life fighting, right? Kind of idea. But when I think of Kamina and I think of like some of the stuff they do in Gurren Lagann, like how big do they get? Like galaxy level or something, multi-galaxy level, and they're fighting in like giant like robots, and it's like not realistic, but it just gets you so pumped up. It gets you right in the right mindset, and that's something that would just feel weird in another medium. You know, if it's like that over the top, that like yes, do it, do anything. Like, yeah, I think anime definitely has a nice monopoly on that currently, and also, though, I will say you're right that certain anime causes us to aspire to something greater, like an ideal, and I totally agree with that. And this isn't disagreeing with that, but I will also point out that slice of life, which I do like. I've been watching less of it lately, but I really like, and some of my favorite anime are slice of life. It's exactly what we can get from literature in the sense that it shows us the world around us in a way we don't see because we're too used to it. Like, so we're walking through life, we can not notice what's around. We can take our relationships for granted with our family, with our friends. But once you see something in the literature or in anime, all of a sudden we can see, hey, these characters are complicated characters, you know? Like, for example, there was one that I watched which is called My Roommate is a Cat. And it's hilarious because it's just like a guy who's a writer with a pet cat. But in the anime,
Brilliant.
Yes, in the anime, his parents die, right? That's one of the first things that happens. And he really kind of has this journey where he's really cut off. He loves books, but he's cut off from the real world. And he really has this journey he needs to undergo where he needs to realize how his parents were always trying to kind of help him and invite him to come and how much he meant to them, but he'd always be like, no, you guys go on vacation on your own. And his mom put all this thought into getting him to go on vacations with him. And it makes me think like, man, like am I appreciating my own mom enough? Am I appreciating my own parents enough? And literally in that way, it can get us to look at the world with fresh eyes and our relationships with fresh eyes. And I think that's the power that slice of life has. Like, are we being good people? Are we calling our mom every day? Are we being nice to the stranger who we don't know what they're going through, but in anime we might see a stranger have reasons for acting how they're acting, right? So don't take it personally. So like all art, I believe that it can really give us a new zest for life and really see life in a new way, which if we're living in autopilot, we kind of don't get.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like you're commenting on how there's, even though it may not be that quote unquote like realistic, that's the thing that separates it from other forms of media or literature. It has that sort of timelessness with the characters. I really like the idea of like some of these characters, you're able to witness how they like struggle like us. Mm-hmm. And there's a great book, I might have mentioned it before, Jane Austen Education.
Yes, I actually bought it.
Did you?
I still have to read it. I bought it when you told me about it.
Yeah, and the author, he spends an entire chapter on the book Emma, mm-hmm. and he talks about how Emma taught him not to be like a good person, but he read the flaws of Emma and he was very critical, like, oh, this woman, right, doesn't give anyone any attention and she's very self-absorbed. And then he realized, oh my goodness, that's me.
Yes.
Right, that's the way I've been treating my friends, my family. And so, yeah, I love the idea of how, you know, we don't necessarily have to learn from like these ideal characters, but like very flawed characters that resemble our own flaws. And by reflecting on them, observing these characters, we learn about ourselves. We learn how we're flawed as well.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that in anime too. In this situation, I was also like, I looked at him and like I saw myself in that character with the cat, and I'm like, man, I've definitely been too often taking like my family for granted and like doing my own thing, zoning out, and not paying attention to all of like the nice things they often do. And once you think back, you're like, oh man, like, and it makes you want to be a better person. So yeah, for sure, seeing your flaws reflected back at you and other characters is something you can expect from anime. definitely.
Yeah, and I do think you should appreciate me more.
Yes.
So, keep watching these anime.
And I'm always and that's the other thing. Like we're always working on improving ourselves. So definitely I'll keep watching anime so I can respect my brother more. That's definitely
But then if I'm like, hey Igor, can you help me with something? It's like, man, I'm watching anime. You see, I'm busy. And then he's like, well, that character's.
It's the
I
thing.
wish he treated his brother better. Close the door.
He's ironically watching his own flaws on TV.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what I also wanted to talk about was Vinland Saga, just because I think that's really good. Everybody, we don't have to get too much into it, but I think everybody who likes Vikings, which is like a really good show, at least until what happens to Ragnar. But I think this is like the anime version of that, and I believe it's my favorite anime this season, along with Demon Slayer. So I think everyone should watch it if they haven't, and it's definitely a more mature one than most.
Yeah, so that would not be a shonen. That would not be geared at teens. I don't think it's more a seinen, meaning geared at actual adults. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of action, but there's also a lot of killing and blood and stuff. So obviously, viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm curious. You have a podcast.
Yes.
About anime. How has anime become for you like this? Like, I don't know how you would describe it. This maybe community building network. Like this. Like, how has it allowed you to network with other people?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you're just a fan of anime, if you visit forums or Reddit or Twitter, whatever media, and you can chat with other anime fans and kind of get to know each other. And if an anime is airing live the day it airs, you post about it, you see other people post about it, and you meet people that way. Because we're YouTubers, we met other YouTubers within the anime YouTube community, mm-hmm. and through that we kind of established the Rad Cafe Anime Podcast, which is a podcast that I do with two fellow YouTubers, Nuxtaku and Briggs from All Day Anime, and then we bring other YouTubers on as guests for different episodes. And it's been Rad Cafe itself has been a really interesting experience because we get other guests coming on different days. We meet them, we discuss anime with them, we have fun. It's a very informal podcast. It's not like big rules and stuff. It's just kind of ranting. A lot of time we're talking over each other, just having fun, memeing. So it's one of those like lighthearted podcasts where you just kind of listen to laugh rather than, I'm going to have a scripted information session right now kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's been a great community building experience. A lot of the people who watch Rad Cafe are fans of all of us hosts, myself, Nuxtaku, and Briggs. And then through Rad Cafe, we have that community where all of our fans and viewers get together, chat with each other. We have memes that come from the podcast that only our fans will understand, other people won't. So that's kind of something that makes us, bonds us closer together than, otherwise. So I think it's very interesting. Very cool.
And I will say that like once you have that connection with anime, all of a sudden there's so much you guys can talk about with whoever you meet. I remember in university, before I was even really working on the YouTube channel a lot, way before we started taking it seriously, if someone said they liked anime, I was like, oh my god, what about this one? What about this? They're like, yeah, what about this one, this one? And then all of a sudden, like, the people I'm with would be like, are we gonna go? Like, because you lose track of time. It's a really, it's funny. It's a cool bond, and I'm sure it's like that with like a bunch of things, right? Like if you have some people into Star Trek or people into a certain philosopher, like I'm sure they can talk for a really long time. But there's that, and a huge thing is connecting with subscribers and fans, because they recommend a bunch of anime that I wouldn't have watched otherwise. So that's really cool because I can go to them and be like, oh, I really like this anime. What's like this? And the fans can actually help me out and see what should I watch next. So that's been a really cool experience, along with other YouTubers being able to give us their own expertise.
Yeah, so back in the day before we did anime as a job on a daily basis, I was also like that. I would feel like if someone's like, I like anime, I'd be like, oh my god, let's talk about anime, that's awesome. I can't believe I found another anime fan. But now that I'm so exposed to anime on a daily basis, now if we like go out and we meet someone who says they don't like anime, I'm like, what? You don't watch anime? Like you haven't seen Attack on Titan, bro? Like But it's because I'm so immersed in it that now it's like weird when someone doesn't. Whereas before, like you find someone who does and you would be like amazed. But it's just a difference in terms of perspective, right?
I agree. I didn't think about it until you just said it, but yeah, like if someone's like I don't watch anime, I'm just like that's weird. Like that's what I think. I'm like in my head I don't say it, but I'm like that's so weird. But yeah, definitely that's one of the benefits that we have now, that we're always surrounded with like people like anime, so it's just like the norm, right? It's not like this thing where it's like, oh, it's so rare to find someone who watches it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, for calling you weird.
No, yeah, I'm not. No, yeah, I obviously don't watch it, but that's because I don't think I haven't given it a chance. I'm not against watching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'll ask this question then. I asked this when we had Giacomo on the podcast about movies. So myself, I'm interested in self-development. If I wanted to, maybe if you could recommend, I don't know, a couple animes to check out which really touch on some of the themes we talk about on the podcast, and just say watch, the first season or something. What are a couple that you would recommend?
Well, I would recommend now, because Vinland Saga is airing right now and it is a mature one. I would definitely recommend it. Did you watch the show Vikings?
No.
No?
Vikings would be one of them.
Yeah, I didn't really watch Vikings either, to be honest. Igor likes it, but I definitely like Vinland Saga, so I would recommend that because it's, it's Vikings. It's not necessarily, you don't have to be immersed in Japanese culture to get it, because it's not related to Japanese culture directly. What other one? I would definitely recommend Death Note, because it was my gateway anime, right? And I would recommend it because it is a mature, interesting anime, a battle of wits kind of thing, a thriller. So I think that would also be good for wetting your beak, as they say. What else? And of course, I recommend Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann to everyone, but maybe not as your first anime, because that is an over-the-top anime. So you got to be always a little bit open-minded with that. If you're only used to watching like realistic types of shows, don't start with Gurren Lagann.
Yeah, I'd recommend, Ryan, that you watch Run with the Wind, or I believe that's what the title is, the anime about runners. And literally, it's perfect. We talked about it, and I think you'd like it. Like, do you ever, Ryan, when you watched, like, let's say, read a book or watched a movie or something, did you ever like feel super excited and like you just had to go out for a run?
Specifically go out for a run?
Yes.
Well, I guess definitely the things I talk about when I talk about running.
Did it?
But did it motivate me to run? For sure, yeah.
Okay. So that's one. And to be honest, like, I like that book, but it definitely didn't motivate me like some of this stuff. But can you think of a work of fiction outside of anime that made you feel like that?
Specifically to run?
Or like really work out or anything, like to get just like motivate you to really throw yourself into something.
Into physical exercise,
yes.
I think, specifically. I can't really think of anything fiction-wise. I mean, I've had stuff that's inspired me to go do something.
Yeah.
Specifically running or physical exercise. I can't think of a work of fiction.
Okay, and I think that this one will. And Hajime no Ippo, a really good one about a boxer. That one, they do road work, right? Boxers do road work, which is like running long distances to build up their cardio and endurance. And when I watched that, when I was in university, I'd watch that sometimes, and I just feel so pumped up after episodes.
Would it be your Rocky kind of thing?
Yes, except 100 times more. Again, anime, over the top, way more, like it's like Rocky on steroids kind of thing. So imagine Rocky was on steroids. But like, yeah, it's like Rocky on steroids, and like I absolutely had to go out for a run after watching some episodes. Like it just got me so fired up. So that's the kind of emotions that you could potentially be feeling. I do think everything has its place. I think literature gets me to think about like life, where am I living the right way? Like what flaws can I see in these characters? But literature has never gotten me so like motivated, fired up in the same way. It's more like of a calming wave, while anime is like this burning fire that sometimes like really gets me to do stuff like go running or going to work out or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because none of us would say, oh, just watch anime, forget books or movies or whatever. We just want to, our point is that anime is a unique medium. It has its own unique perspective because it's animated. The budget isn't as high. They don't need as high a budget to do really interesting things. Like if they want to do a space story, They don't need a huge budget in sci-fi. They can do it through animation. So it offers a unique perspective. It has music that is often really cool. The visuals all coming together. And yeah, like I read books, of course, and I love literature, but I think that anime offers a unique perspective. Not saying that you should only watch anime, not saying it's superior, but it's definitely unique and distinct, and everyone should give it a shot.
Yeah, because it's so wide open. There's so many anime out there that literally whoever you are, you'll find something that like is really well suited for you.
Exactly. Yeah. So anime itself is not a genre, right? Anime itself is a medium, and then you have many different types of genres. So like I said, you have anime strictly directed for adults that are extremely dark. You have anime for children. You have anime for teens. You have anime that are horror. You have anime that are thriller, that are comedy, that are romance, that are action, that are fantasy, all sorts of stuff. And there's some mixtures. There's magical realism anime that I think are really good. It's like a slice of life with elements of magical realism, very like similar to like Marquez or Borges type of stuff. So I think that, historical anime, there's a lot of great historical anime, especially about Japan and Japanese history. So I definitely recommend checking it out, giving it a shot. And of course, if you do and tell your friends, eventually we're going to be making more money
Which
as anime YouTubers.
is what it comes down to, right?
Patreon.com/AnimeUproar.
Patreon.com/AnimeUproar. Definitely. Yeah, and I feel like that's the case. And I don't even want to give the wrong idea to say like it's all over the top, because there is also it excels in that, I think, in a way that no other medium does. But there's also really like realistic ones, like Monster, for example. I think is done in a very realistic style. Grave of the Fireflies, done in a very realistic style. And then there are anime that I watch, like that I'm watching right now. March Comes in Like a Lion, and that is amazing, because just in the last episode that I watched, they're shogi players, which is like Japanese chess kind of thing. And there was an old guy throughout the series that kind of like comes in and he talks to the main character, and he's a shogi player, and he always seems upbeat, right? And then this last episode, we got an internal view of him before the match that he was playing, and everything he was going through, and I'm like, oh my god, this is brilliant, because I did not give a second thought about that character, and yet this is how deep it is. This is what he's going through. He's wondering what he's going to do after retirement. Like, he really doesn't want to lose because he's afraid of not being able to, like, he's not going to have anything to do after he loses in shogi. All of his friends who didn't make it as far as he did put all their hopes on him, so he's carrying all of their hopes. Some of them are even, like, almost relying on him financially kind of thing. And it's like he's always this upbeat guy who's really positive, and yet he's struggling with all this stuff. So one shogi match, all of a sudden, this guy's whole life and the lives of the people that are relying on him are all dependent on the outcome, while the other guy, we know even better. So it's like, even him, it's not like you want him to lose. So it's really well done, and it's like that in real life, right? You see someone, let's say at the Tim Hortons, you have no idea what their life is like, but then you watch anime or literature and you see like, oh my god, what can these people actually be going through? And it sounds like like everybody seems like a much more fleshed out human, like they are in real life, rather than how sometimes we can underestimate what's going on with people.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because in fiction, because I write fiction and I've published fiction, often they tell you that head hopping should be avoided. So what I mean by that is that you should not be in the same scene hopping from the perspective of one character to another in order to see what they actually are thinking. They're like, you've got to stick to one main character that is the narrator, so it's from their perspective, so you can read their thoughts, but not everyone else's. But with anime, they do a lot of head hopping. They often go in the same scene from like one character's perspective, inner monologue, to another, and I think that is unique and valuable. And like I said, if you read a lot of fiction here, you might not get that, but it is really interesting because, yeah, in the same scene, you can actually see where these characters are coming from and not just the one perspective.
Definitely. And Death Note comes to mind, like some of the back and forth between the main characters Light and L are like some of the best moments in any medium you'll encounter. So definitely I agree with Animak. Check out Death Note if you don't know about anime, if you like it, if you think it'll be too childish, definitely check out Death Note. It should prove you wrong.
Yeah, what's interesting, I think when I had you two in the summer coming to my class talking about
Yeah, that was
what it's
awesome,
like to
by
be
the
a
way. Thank you
YouTuber.
for that.
That was cool.
I'm pretty sure that was the show that you connected with a couple of the students with.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I think they even asked, one of the students asked, Light or Lelouch. And like, what an amazing question to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pleasure being in that class.
Yeah, those two guys are both geniuses.
Yeah, they're
That
both
that we
geniuses.
respect, yeah.
And yeah, like my answer was, if you guys are wondering if you like anime, I think Light is smarter, but I think Lelouch is all around a much more likable character, and I like him more as a character.
Yeah, but for me right now, it's all about Eren Yeager, baby.
Yes, exactly. And this is a question that I was actually thinking a while back, and now I remembered, thankfully. And it might like throw you off, but like, let's see. Build the anticipation of that.
Well, this better be good now, because otherwise.
How do you think your life would be different right now if you never watched anime? If at that point where you stopped watching it, you never got back into it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, because I would definitely still be reading, because I've always been reading, both fiction and like philosophy and stuff like that. So I would probably be exactly where Ryan is, like lost and hopeless.
Oh my god.
I'm kidding, right?
No.
I'm kidding. No, like
I did not see that coming. His face was so serious.
I'm working on my routine, everybody. But no, I think that.
I thought you were going to say a teacher for a second.
Yeah, no, exactly, because I went to grad school to be a
yeah.
professor, right?
Yeah.
So I would be still in academia. I would be, reading and watching media here that I'm exposed to.
Yeah.
But I would. I feel like my life would not be as rich because of the fact that we make money with anime. No, because of because of the fact that I think anime is a unique medium that I discovered. I'm glad that I did, because it offers a different perspective. And even like often anime draws inspiration from Western literature. Like my favorite novel is Count of Monte Cristo. There is a sci-fi version of the Count of Monte Cristo called Gankutsuo anime. So I saw that, and it's a different story, but it's a cool take on an old story that I recognized. So yeah, it's just a different perspective and a different cool medium that opens up our minds more, that teaches us important lessons, that it is a form of self-development if you make it to be, that is sometimes more accessible, because you don't always want to sit and read a book. Sometimes you'd like to just watch something, but you can watch an anime that has cool music. So there's the audio component, the visual components, and it's just another perspective that it offers, and another medium that can help you improve your life.
And what's cool is it can be a shared experience, right? So you can watch with
Yes.
someone and like comment on it, which you could do with like movies too, but you can't do necessarily with books. Like,
Yeah.
you guys are reading at different speed levels. Even if you try,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work as well. So that's also a really fun thing. And like me and my friends did that before. Me and you watched some stuff. Now we're like so busy with the schedules, we don't even watch stuff together anymore. But like, yeah, that can be very interesting, commenting on stuff as you're watching.
Yeah, as something new is airing, everyone's watching it at the same time.
Yeah, that's
which
a
is
cool
like,
experience.
No one's gonna be like reading chapters of a book at the same time.
And that's the other thing. With books, maybe this is just me being lazy and not getting enough into the book culture. But definitely, if we go on YouTube numbers, like there just seems to be a lot less interest in books and specific books than there are in anime. So I just feel like you have a much larger pool of people that you can communicate about this stuff with than with like books. Because I know a bunch of people, if I watch an anime, who I can talk with it about. But when it comes to like a specific book, all of a sudden that list gets really, really short.
Yeah.
So that's another thing in our modern times that you can see as a benefit. There's much more people who will be excited with you, who will talk with you about it. While it's harder to find in this day and age people who read specific things you're reading, even though because it's even hard sometimes to find people who are just reading in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Because there's so many options out there now in terms of streaming and podcasts and all this stuff. Not as many people read in general.
yeah, that's that communal experience. And I don't think everyone needs to read. Like, I definitely love reading, but I know many successful people, including Gary Vaynerchuk and Kanye West, Kanye, who don't read, but yet they're killing it in their own way. So definitely you don't need to read, but yeah, from my perspective, it's been like invaluable.
Yeah. I'm curious, what sort of, if you have any, what sort of, this could be for either of you, what sort of future projects do you have in terms of trying to combine anime with self-development / like getting into life lessons, teaching life lessons?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think we'll always be like incorporating into our videos because it's something like we're passionate about. And Tolstoy said that the novel should always be written to help people with the real world, like to either get people to live better lives by educating them in some way or showing them something they're not usually considering. And I think obviously some people view anime as escapism, but I think anime should be the same thing as what Tolstoy felt about novels, that it should in a sense change who you are for the better. And that's, in my opinion, what art should do. So I want to kind of approach everything I do with that kind of mindset, including videos. Like, I do sometimes character breakdowns, and I really try to force home like the self-development elements, and people seem to really appreciate it when I put it in, like, let's say the entire life of Explain. People, like, I get people saying like they cried, right, when they watched the video, like a bunch of comments. So I'm like, okay, cool, like this is clearly we're getting somewhere. People are like feeling something, and they're getting that story of that individual, which they can't get in the anime. That's something we can offer. They can't get it in the anime like that because there's all this different stuff happening at once. So you kind of forget what happened to the character before, what happens after. But we have this opportunity to construct a narrative about that character from our own kind of perspective that can teach lessons as he goes, because you can learn from people's lives, right? Biographies are considered a great way to learn about life and to learn about other people's lessons. This is exactly like that. We're taking these larger than life anime characters and we're breaking them down and showing them lessons that they've learned, what we can learn from their experience. And I love doing those videos too because I'm learning as I'm writing. I'm not like, okay, I know this, I will put it on paper, I will record it and set it up. No, like I'm figuring it out as I go. That's what writing is, right? And you don't even know what you're gonna end up like necessarily saying at the end. And by the time it's finished, you've learned something, and hopefully the people who've seen it learn something and get a new appreciation for that character.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely plan to keep doing that type of stuff. And also eventually, you know, if there is interest in pursuing this idea of improving your life through anime, we're open to, you know, writing a book on it or doing courses on it to help people, you know, while enjoying anime, also improve their lives, which is what we're doing with ourselves.
Exactly. And like a lot of stuff that you'll see in self-development, because Ryan, you've been getting more and more into self-development, and I've been into self-development, and a lot of the things, like again with these characters, is they're permeating with these beliefs, and it just helps you internalize, put a face to it. When you think about a specific thing you read in a self-development book, you don't always have a concrete example that sticks with you. But if I can compare it to like an anime character I know, all of a sudden, bam, when I need to think of overcoming an obstacle, I can think of how this character overcame this crazy obstacle, so I can overcome this less crazy one.
That's a great point, and honestly, I didn't think of it that way before. But yeah, like, so for example, you can read a book that tells you never give up, but it's not as personal as when you have a character that you relate to, like say Asta or any protagonist, and then you're like, I never give up. Oh, that's like Asta does. He never gives up. And, you know, that's who I should model my thing on. Because in terms of mental pictures, like a lot of us think with mental pictures.
And emotions.
Yeah. So in terms of like when you're thinking about the idea of not giving up, if you can immediately place a picture of Asta in your head, that solidifies it for you. Okay, I know what I have to do. Whereas if you're thinking about something in a book, it's not necessarily as personal, as immediate. So yeah, great point, man.
Thank you,
Igor. Wow.
And that
Developing
immediate,
all of us right here right now.
and that immediate, I think, is like definitely the key word, because it just gives you that infusion of motivation.
Especially in the modern world, right? That it's so like instant gratification, right?
For sure.
Well, I think that's what, in our last episode, the mayor was talking about, how he tries to talk about different lessons through stories instead of just saying, this is what you should do, right? And even myself, when I teach, if there's, an incident that happened with a student and I'm trying to tell the class, I'm trying to address them about this issue, right? A lot of times I don't just say, so don't do that again, because that's not going to stick, right? That's like kind of like bossing you around, right? But when you tell it through, oh, I knew a guy, and then you start talking and, you walk in that guy's shoes. I don't know. I'm just.
It's fun. No, I agree.
But you try to illustrate that through a story about someone else, and then you're kind of walking with that person, and then you're able to tell the story through that way. I think it's more powerful,
100%.
and you can connect more than just.
Yeah, and just a quick example, in that specific example, and we all do it, we're egoic when it comes to being confronted about stuff. So let's say Boyan or Animak comes to me and says, bro, you're acting selfish. I'm like, no, I'm not, But I see it in an anime character who's, has a pet cat as a roommate. And then I'm like, oh man, it's true. Like when you don't see it like when you're not confronted by it and you see it in someone else, you're like, man, I do this. So for sure, I think hearing stories creates that distance where all of a sudden you can actually judge objectively rather than having to defend your ego, right?
Yeah, I really like that story of your brother saying, come and help me, Igor, and you saying, no, I'm watching anime, how to be a better person. So you have to leave me alone. I'm trying to become a better person.
That's a paraphrase, but for sure.
It's a parable.
Yeah. It is, interestingly enough, for sure.
All right, yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of anything at the moment. Animak, if you have anything else you want to bring up, you can.
No, I don't, because we got to save it for part 2.
All right, yeah, because there will be parts here for sure. And I will let Animak give his final thoughts and sign off.
Yeah, okay. Thank you guys for having me. Pleasure. I think you've been doing a great job with the podcast. I think podcasts are the future. A lot of people, myself included, I listen to a lot of podcasts because, if I'm doing the dishes or some other task, I don't need to be watching it. I'm just listening and learning things along the way. So I listen to podcasts about history, leaders, all sorts of different stuff, like conspiracy theories, whatever. Whatever mood.
He makes me listen to it sometimes.
Whatever mood I'm in, right? Assassinations, famous assassinations, stuff like that. And I think that definitely keep going with this, because this is a great way to, learn and improve your life while doing other stuff that we all have to do anyway, driving or washing dishes or, whatever it is. So I think definitely keep at it. We're going to do more parts of this, because I do believe that anime is something that I love and truly enjoy, is a form of self-development if you have the right frame of mind, just like books and everything else. So yeah, let's make it our mission to bring that to more people, to get them to that realization and have fun together, learning and improving our lives through anime.
Yes, and even if he's not in every episode, Animak is very close to the whole procedure, and he's always there, and he's a part of our self-development team. So it's good to have him here. And do you want to sign off in our anime way?
Yes.
All right. Until next time.
See ya, Space Cowboys.
Bang.